Anyways, so as it relates to Levar Woods, you and I, I called in during your live Big Ten show yesterday, and as I called in, that news broke, which I thought was kind of funny that Pat Fitzgerald had been relieved of his duties. And I'm sitting there talking to you live, and I'm thinking, okay, Jim Leonhard, the name you brought up first. Obviously, Lovie Smith came into my mind. He coached at Illinois, knows the Big Ten recruiting stuff. Obviously, he was a successful head coach with the Bears. But that one just doesn't – I just don't think that's going to happen. That one doesn't really – there are some connections to be made there, but I doubt that happens. I brought up Matt Campbell. Let me explain why I brought up Matt Campbell, because I think there were some people later in your show that were like, why would he leave Iowa State? It's not necessarily as simple as some people make these things out to be. Like, Matt Campbell was coveted 2 years ago. He had a chance at the Tennessee job 2 years ago. There were rumblings about him maybe being the next guy at Ohio State. But since then, that program has struggled. They went 4-8 last year, and he's not on the hot seat. However, we have discussed how Iowa State has struggled in the recruiting trail in 2024 within the state of Iowa. There's no question about it. You look at rankings. I know we just kind of downplayed some rankings, but the rankings, when you look at how much Iowa's dominated at the top within the state, it's pretty impressive and somewhat damning for Iowa State. So my response to that is it's just purely speculation, but things can change. Would it make sense if Campbell had an opportunity to jump to a Big Ten school, albeit Northwestern, that maybe with the changing landscape of the conferences and the decline that it appears that program is on right now, they've got gambling issues they're sorting through that will result in some suspensions this year. I can tell you that for a fact. I just, you know where I'm going with this? Like, that wouldn't be an outlandish or foolish move, in my opinion. It might be an opportunity if Northwestern still looked at him in that light to say, hey, I'm going to go before I don't have a place to go, right? Like, in a year, if they have another 4-8, 5-7 year, he might be on the hot seat. As crazy as that sounds, because Iowa State fans tend to worship Matt Campbell. But he might be on the hot seat if that happens, and rightfully so. I mean, you can't – Iowa State is not Northwestern. It's not Vanderbilt. Although Iowa State is not a power, at some point there have to be standards. And if you're winning, 4 to 5 games a year, that's not good enough. Paul Rhodes found that out the hard way. I'm just saying, I don't think that will happen, but I would not, if Northwestern were interested in Matt Campbell, if I'm Matt Campbell, I'm at least taking that phone call.
Yeah, you can make an adjustment of your expectations. So when Matt Campbell took over Iowa State, they were winning 3 and 4 games a year. He quickly lifted them to 7 and 8 wins a year. And there was hope there that would continue and they would continue to ascend. Well, they plateaued in 2020, going to the Fiesta Bowl, winning 9 games that year, 9 and 3. And they have fallen back since then. So there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, great job. You got us to a point, but now we're regressing. We're not moving ahead. We're actually regressing. And now it's time to move on and find the guy that can move us to the next level. Mike, thank you for the compliment. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Mike. So, by the way, I don't know if it's the same Aaron that we have here on our live show, but I'm gonna take a little shot at Aaron because he was, again, maybe not the same Aaron, but somebody was named Aaron was on my channel earlier today. And his response to my video about Levar Woods possibly being a prime candidate for the Northwestern job was this. He says, 0 chance. If you were looking at assistants, Hartline would be number 1. More likely Paul Chryst. My response, first of all, I don't see Paul Chryst taking that job. And I don't think... Would you place Paul Chryst ahead of even Levar Woods? Like, Paul Chryst is maybe. Those guys, to me, are on the same tier right now. Paul Chryst is not some coveted name out in college football world.
They're on the same tier for completely different reasons. Paul Chryst is a safe choice. He's hit his peak. It would be surprising to me whether Paul Chryst ever ascends to the level of a Wisconsin job ever again, where Levar Woods is on the ascent.
By the way, Aaron says it is the same Aaron, so I got to be careful with how much I rip into him here, Mark. So I just responded to Aaron. I said, look, Hartline is out of Northwestern's league. And I believe that to be true. And his response was, well, he's a wide receivers coach. He's not out of their league. Well, he's also the coordinator. And yes, Aaron brought up the amount of money that he could potentially be making. What was Fitz's salary at Northwestern toward the end? 5 million?
Yeah, maybe a little bit more.
So there's no doubt that you're going to be making more as the head coach at Northwestern as opposed to being the OC at Ohio State. But as I responded to him, it's not just as simple as saying, well, he's going to make this much more at Northwestern, so why would he not take the job? Mark, you tell me if I'm wrong on this. If Brian Hartline sticks around Ohio State for another year or two with a $1.6 million salary, which I think is what he's at now that he's the OC, that is like the number, well, maybe not number one, definitely top 2 or 3 in the country as far as assistant coaching positions in college football that could potentially make a leap to a high major job, kind of like Ryan Day did. So I'm just saying, like, you have an opportunity. Yeah, he could jump to North if they pursued him. Maybe Brian Hartline jumps to Northwestern, and maybe he succeeds there. But if he doesn't, because he doesn't have much talent, and he's been really good at Ohio State with a lot of talent around him. The crop of receivers he's had there has been incredible, and give him credit for developing them. But he's not going to have that at Northwestern. He's just not. And I guess I'm just thinking if he were to go to Northwestern, you could potentially kind of derail things early in your career. Am I making sense?
Yeah,
If you
absolutely.
fail there, it could be hard to recover.
Yeah, there are certain times in which you've got to look at a situation, both the current situation for the coach and the proposed situation. And it's not just the standard, okay, well, he's a position coach or he's a coordinator and he can go to a Power 5 head coaching job. Usually that's automatic. Absolutely. You make that jump. But there are exceptions, and that would be one of them.
Yeah,
There are people out there that believe Ryan Day is short-lived at Ohio State, either by if he breaks through and wins a national championship, that he's off to the NFL, or I've had this posed to me by a few people that are solid football commentators that say, does he get fired if he goes 10-2?
I was going to say I think he could make the jump to the NFL even without winning a national title. I don't know why he's got to win a national title to jump to the league.
Just if he has the thought that, I want to accomplish that at this level and then move on. But you're right. He doesn't have to.
It may be a situation like what we almost saw happen to Harbaugh here a couple of years ago. If they're not quite hitting expectations and he's starting to feel some pressure, he may just start taking some interest in NFL jobs and leave. That could always happen. And maybe Brian Hartline would be next guy in line. Maybe he wouldn't. But there's a lot of stress that comes from being a head coach. And I'm not saying there's not stress being a coordinator, but look at Phil Parker. You don't think Phil Parker's had opportunities? I guarantee you he's had opportunities to at least interview for Power 5 head coaching positions. I would be shocked beyond belief if Phil Parker has not had those on the table. And I do believe that it's not been Phil Parker not being a good enough candidate. I think in the end, he's just decided he's comfortable with what he's doing at Iowa as a DC, and I respect that. And he and Brian Hartline are totally different people. One guy's older, one guy's younger, coached opposite sides of the ball. They're different. But I'm just saying it's not always black and white like that. And I just think, do you think Brian Hartline's a candidate for Northwestern?
I think he may be one of their candidates, but I completely agree with you. That's a step back. He doesn't need to take that step. He can do better than that. There's no reason to take that risk in your career. What you're talking about and Phil Parker and what it appears as though he has decided for his career is very much, I liken it to what I experienced in corporate America. People are really good at their job, and some of those people want to go into management. So we would see people ascend through the organization. And I did when I was first at my last job and for the first 2 or 3 years. And then I went into management. Other people, they want no part of management. They're really good at their job, and either they're not going to be good at management, or they don't want that pressure. They don't want to have to deal with people and making those kind of decisions. And it's the same thing here. If you are at your very core a football coach And you want to be on the field. You want to be drawing up X's and O's. You want to be teaching players technique and schemes. And you don't want to have to talk to the media and be held responsible and going to the booster clubs constantly and all that. And running the org, being the CEO, those are two different jobs.
And although Ohio State doesn't lose much because they win so much, yeah, Ryan Day gets a lot of credit, but everybody seems to love Brian Hartline. He goes to Northwestern. He becomes a villain to a lot of people. And I'm not saying that's going to be a priority on his decision-making list, but I'm just saying they're just two different, totally different animals. I think Northwestern is better. That's why I think Levar Woods, although I can tell you for a certainty, and I've heard this over the last 24 hours from people well connected to the program. I had one source tell me that Levar has made it clear to his unit and to parents within the unit that he is sticking here as long as Kirk is here. But again, things change, Mark. Like, things can change. He may not have anticipated when he said that he's going to get a Big Ten job offer. I don't think many people saw the Pat Fitzgerald firing coming down. And I wouldn't blame Levar Woods if those things change. You can't just assume. You can't lock a guy in just because he says, well, I'm content now. And also, here's the other part of this. And I said this on the video. If people want to go back and watch that video, I encourage you to do that because I kind of ran through a bunch of different criteria of why I think Levar would qualify for that job. Levar also has a son, Mason Woods, who's already got an offer from Missouri, already got an offer from Iowa. He's right there in Iowa City West. He's a 2025 guy. Maybe Levar would like to be his coach. I mean, he can maybe coach him on special teams at Iowa, but if Brian's going to stay the OC and Phil Parker's going to stick around as long as Kirk's there, then maybe Levar doesn't get that opportunity to be his position coach or at least be his head coach. So those are all things that I think about. I mean, I have hesitated because I'm not some Levar Woods homer. People have brought his name up for the Iowa job, and what have I said? Whoa, let's hold the horses on that. He's never called plays. You've got a potential of being able to go after guys who have unbelievable experience at the SEC level, like Mark Stoops, or even a guy from the Big 12 level in Bob Stoops. Potentially a guy like Brett Bielema, who's coached in the Big Ten, coached in the SEC. You got all these proven commodities. Why are you going after a guy who's never been a position coach, been a defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, or a play caller? So I've pulled the brakes on that. But from Northwestern's point of view, they don't have the luxury of saying, well, we might be able to pick from Mark Stoops or Brett Bielema or Phil Parker. They don't have that. And Levar Woods is I think he's a very intriguing candidate for that job. And he's done well in the past recruiting in the Illinois area, in the St. Louis area. I know it's a different animal recruiting to the standards of Northwestern academics, but his upside is real. He's a young guy at 45, but he's also 45. Like, at some point, if he wants to be head coach, which he does, he has been on the record in saying that, at some point he's going to make a jump. And if Kirk, sticks it out longer than we all expect, I wouldn't expect Levar Woods to stick it out for another 4 or 5 years.
We've talked about the challenge facing Iowa in the new landscape of the Big Ten starting in 2024 with no divisions. But Iowa's still going to be, we would think, extremely competitive and in the mix. Northwestern, this is a school that's won 2 Western Division championships, made it to 2 conference championship games. And there's no question right now, this is the worst football program in the conference. And it just got worse. And now with no divisions, what is the hope of them getting any better? On the plus side, for an opportunistic person out there, this is an opportunity to be a hero. And we've talked about pressure, and every coach in the Big Ten has pressure, but this has to be the least amount of pressure in certain respects because you get to come in. This football team has been terrible the last 2 years. So you're expected to be terrible. You have to clean up a mess. You have to move on from there. I think they need somebody who's very declarative in their statements, a great communicator, somebody strong that completely detaches from everything that went on prior And then, they have a mulligan for year one. It doesn't matter what they do. If they go 2-10, that might be like, let's throw them a parade because they're going to be awful.
And unless Paul Chris just has the mindset of, I want to get back at Wisconsin and I want to resurrect my career, there's no reason for him to come out of retirement, excuse me, or whatever he's in right now, to coach at Northwestern. Now, Levar Woods, that could be a springboard. You look at what James Franklin, his storyline. Northwestern's one of those programs, I think you'd agree with this, Mark, like a Vanderbilt, that if you can win there, you become a commodity. I mean, Pat Fitzgerald had an opportunity to be a head coach at Chicago for the Bears after what was his record prior to that? Wasn't it a losing season? Didn't he get offered after a losing season?
Yeah, I think he did after a 5-7 year.
So the fact that that's what I'm saying. Like, we don't have to win national titles at Northwestern. It's going to be hard to compete there even harder now that we're leaving out of the division format. But I think what you said is true. And for a guy like Levar, maybe he looks at it, and if Northwestern was interested in him, and he looks at it and says, "No, I'm going to stick around here. I feel like I can get a better Power 5 job when I'm ready." Maybe he'll do that. I hope he does. I like Levar Woods. I don't want him to go anywhere. But at the same time, I'm just saying I would not blame him at all if he were to entertain that. Who knows if Northwestern, I know there's been a lot of respect between Northwestern and Iowa. Now, some of that's been from Fitzgerald to Kirk and vice versa. So I don't know if he's even on their radar. I saw somebody tweet out, and it might have just been totally ridiculous, but somebody said the BYU head coach could be in consideration. Is that legitimate? Have you heard this?
So this is another case. No, I've seen it brought up. And Bronco Mendenhall has my utmost respect. I think he's a tremendous football coach. And he coached at a very academically minded university in Virginia and had never coached east of the Mississippi. His entire coaching career was out west. And it was a strange fit from that standpoint, but he did wonders at Virginia. But he's a very balanced man. He's not one of these, I coach and think football 24/7. So he got burnt out and said, I'm spending time with my wife. We're doing things that we want to do. I would like to coach again, probably someday. So he's been removed for a few years. But I think he can do better than that, unless he, again, wants to go to a school where academics come first and he still feels he can be competitive there.
And by the way, I was not talking about Bronco Mendenhall. I was talking about BYU's current coach.
Kalani Sitake.
Yeah, that's the name I had. Somebody threw out there. Don't know if there was any legitimacy to it. But Bronco, I saw somebody there earlier in the chat brought up Mendenhall.
There's also this situation with AJ Henning. So there's the former Michigan wide receiver that we both talked about moving to Iowa for obvious reasons. And now he apparently tweeted something out that wasn't overly harsh, but to basically say kind of like, really, this is what's going on? Kind of like the, hit the forehead kind of deal. So he may be looking to get out of there.
Based on, I'm not saying that shut that down completely, and people have been bringing that up for the last 24 hours, and back when we talked about it, when he entered the transfer portal initially, I can tell you on good authority, based on what I was told when he initially entered the portal, I don't think he and Cade McNamara are as close as maybe people want them to be. And I don't believe that he was ever real high on Iowa's radar. We'll just say that. So I know a lot of Iowa fans, they want AJ Henning to come to Iowa now that Pat Fitzgerald's gone. I doubt that happens, folks. Now, never say never. They played together, and I'm not saying they have a bad relationship, but I'm just saying I don't think that maybe he's been given as high of an endorsement as some people want that to be perceived, if that makes sense. I would doubt AJ Henning. If he enters the portal, I would doubt he comes to Iowa.
Hawkeyes Live, folks, every Tuesday here at the Voice of College Football. And we get together at 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 where it counts. Please join Corey from the Hawkeye of the Storm, where he covers the Hawkeyes each and every day. And again, folks, with by far the most people in here the entire hour, keep in mind that when we finish up here, just go back and watch the portion that you missed. Uh, so we've got about 120 on the line. So again, check out the portion that you missed because those numbers just soared here in the last 15 minutes. Let's see. We're sitting here on July 11th. And so we're 2 weeks away from Big Ten Media Days. So we're going to be gearing it up, folks, when it comes to position breakdowns, opponent breakdowns, of course, getting into fall camp and responding to everything that's stated in talking season here in a couple weeks.
I'll make a request for you. I don't often do this. See if you can get Levi on next week.
Okay.
Because even we don't have to preview Iowa State, but Mark, I'd like to talk with him about recruiting. I'd like to talk with him about Matt Campbell, and I'd like to get his perspective on the gambling situation. I think those are all relevant to Iowa. They are all relevant to Iowa. By the way, can we address this one other chat before we go, Mark? Miles per gallon. This is a fair statement, and let me be devil's advocate or play the other side of this for a second. He says, not trying to be snarky, but could someone please explain why Coach Woods is always mentioned as a potential KF replacement? I'm sure he's great. I just don't know where this talk comes from. Again, I have been very bullish on my opinion on that I don't think he should be even top 3 on the list, in my opinion, as of right now. Until he's proven himself somewhere as a play caller, I'm not just going to anoint him as the next head coach. At the same time, let's acknowledge why people are so high on Levar Woods. This team has been exceptional on special teams under Levar Woods. I mean, exceptional. Maybe the best unit in the country. And those things may be hard to measure collectively, Mark. But you think about the kicking game at Iowa over recent years. Keith Duncan, Miguel Racinos, Caleb Shudak. I'm missing one. Who am I missing? Well, Drew Stevens currently. You look at Torrey Taylor at punter. The punt game has been phenomenal since, well, for the most part, it's been really good. There were a couple of years there at the beginning of Levar's tenure as special teams coordinator where they struggled, and you saw them go with some trick plays that oftentimes worked. I give them credit on that. They oftentimes worked. But once they figured out the punt game, they've sustained that with Torrey. They've been really good in the punt return game with Charlie Jones, and now they got a budding young guy in Cooper DeJean who looks to be heir apparent at that position. They've been solid on kickoffs, although kick returning is so much less of a part of college football than it was 10 years ago. But I think they got a good one in Caleb Johnson or whoever they run back there. Long snapping's never a problem. Holding's never a problem. Like they're just exceptional, kind of like Phil Parker and the defense. They're basically solid everywhere every year. And when your guy's 45 and he played here and he was a good special teams player and he's respected across the country, there's a reason why he's probably going to be a head coach someday. But I do agree that I think it's premature to assume that he's the guy. He's just, because of that resume, he's the best candidate for the Iowa job when Kirk Ferentz retires. Now, in 5 years, if Kirk waits until 27 or 28 to retire, I don't think that's going to happen. But if he does, and Levar has gone somewhere else, or maybe he's taken over for Phil Parker by then yeah, he's going to be at the top of my list, assuming he's performed well wherever he's gone. But I just wanted to explain that because I'm not ripping on Levar Woods. I think he has potential of being. That's why I think Northwestern would do really good at looking at him. Excuse me. I think that would be a wise. What is your thought? I mean, I know you're not as connected to Iowa, but what are your thoughts on Levar Woods to Northwestern? Where would he be on your list based on your expertise?
As I mentioned before, I wrote down 29 candidates and he's included. I did I put him in the top 10? Still have to produce this video, which is going to be some kind of monstrosity to put together. I did not include him in the top 10. So, yeah, everyone says great things about Levar Woods. And I do think that most of this is transferable, meaning you don't have to be a group of 5 coach to precede your status as a power 5 coach. You don't have to follow, people that are capable, people that are natural leaders and have developed their leadership skills who know how to organize, know how to, again, lead, communicate, that those are most important beyond the, okay, technicalities of calling plays. Shoot. Hire great offensive and defensive coordinators. I guess somebody would be out a job then automatically, but
Well, Kirk Ferentz is an example of a guy who I don't think ever called plays formally before he went to Iowa, and he's been
yeah.
very successful. So it's not a rule, but just typically a head coach has a background of calling plays. I also think that the factor of Northwestern no longer being a built-in game every year might make him a little bit more comfortable taking that job. I mean, he's an Iowa guy, right? He played here, has coached here for a long time, has worked his way up the ranks, but
but that happens all the time. Where guys cannot automatically become the head coach where they played and coached on staff, and they have to go somewhere. And many times within the conference, there's a zillion examples of it, and that doesn't show that they've betrayed the school or anything like that. That's still where their heart is and where they would ultimately like to land.
I'll say this, not that I want to lose Levar Woods as Iowa's special teams coordinator, but it is sort of fascinating to think if Kirk is here for 2 or 3 more years, if Levar can go to Northwestern and, prove himself as a head coach for a couple of years at this level, doesn't have to win 8 to 9 games a year, but if he can just prove himself there, and then in a couple of years you've got a list, and whoever the next AD Beth gets has a list of potential candidates, and it reads Brett Bielema, Levar Woods, Mark Stoops. That's a pretty good start, Mark. I'd say that's a pretty darn good start. 3 guys who have succeeded at a high level at the not only Power 5 level, but at the Big Ten/SEC level. I don't know that Levar Woods is there on my list until he proves himself somewhere. So you don't want him to go to a rival school, but they're not going to be a every year play for Iowa. And it may hurt Iowa as far as the transfer portal. I could see a couple of guys, I'm not saying Levar Woods is going anywhere, but if we found out next week Levar Woods is accepted the job at Northwestern, I don't think it'll move that fast. But if it did, you're probably going to see a couple of guys enter the portal. So that would hurt. But that's just kind of my thought process on the situation.
In terms of more content that's connected to this topic, we discussed this on our USC channel last night. So, folks, you can check it out. Basically, we brought to the table who is going to be the toughest coaching matchups for Lincoln Riley and his staff coming into the Big Ten. Not the toughest teams to beat. Those are obvious. The toughest coaching matchups. Certainly, Iowa was prominent in our discussion.